I'm Dennis Anderson along with Pamela Fish, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
Minnesota is now the only state with a split legislative body. We'll talk with local lawmakers about the new balance of power in state government.
We'll continue our series of video reports on what it's like to be deployed in Afghanistan.
And Native artist Carl Gawboy unveiled his star Maiden portrait this week at the WDSE studio. We'll have a look.
These stories and the business news coming up right now on Almanac North. Well, hello once again and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. And Pamela Fish is here this week, filling in for Julie. Welcome back, Pam.
Nice to be here.
Good to have you. Well, politics is on the show to begin tonight, so we might as well get started right away.
All right, thanks, Denny. The midterm elections have created a new balance of power, both in the nation's capital in Washington and the Minnesota capital in St. Paul. Minnesota is now the only state with a split legislative body, with Democrats in control of the House and Republicans in charge of the Senate. So what does that mean for the 2019 legislative session? Joining us now is State Representative Liz Olson of Duluth, a Democrat who will now be in the majority and has been elected House Whip. And Senator Erik Simonson of Duluth is a Democrat in the Senate, which is controlled by the Republican Party. And thanks to both of you for being here. We really appreciate it. I want to start with you, Representative Olson, and ask you what it means to be a whip.
That is a great question. I've held the title for a little over a week.
Okay.
So what it means is we have caucus leadership that we as a caucus decide who's going to represent us and lead us into this new chapter. And so we have Speaker-elect Melissa Hortman, who's at the top of our leadership. And we have Ryan Winkler, who will be our majority leader. And so I'm what is considered the majority whip. So I'll be working with our leadership team to make sure our caucus stays unified around the kind of legislation we want to pass and make sure we stay disciplined on the floor. And we really just work together to be a team to deliver on the legislation we need to this session.
Do you see that as offering more advantages to you in getting things done or not necessarily?
Well, I think it's more of I view it as a team role, that it's about moving our caucus and helping us to be as effective as possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, it helps that I get to be in conversations and help to make decisions, on behalf of and with our caucus. So I think that, is a good place, and it helps Duluth to have a little bit more of that space at the table.
As we alluded to a moment ago, Minnesota is the only legislature in the country now that has a split legislature. What does that mean for getting things done? Maybe both of you could answer it, Erik.
It's something I've lived before. When I was in the House in 15-16, we were in the minority in the House, and the Senate Democrats had control of the Senate. So it's not new to me, but it is very different. But it also provides an opportunity for more balanced government and more opportunity to create solutions. Now, whether we take advantage of that or not remains to be seen.
Sure. Liz?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's helpful to have the setup we do. I think that it'll make us work more effectively. I think that there's some pretty good leaders in charge, both what we've heard from the Senate leadership with Speaker-elect Hortman, Paul Gazelka in the Senate, and then with Majority Leader Winkler and with the Governor-elect Tim Walz. They want to be pragmatic. They want to work together. They don't want to have end of sessions like we've had in the past. So I think it'll force us to be more effective this session.
Senator Simonson, does it give you any more leverage in the Senate to know that the DFL has the majority in the House? Does that help in any way?
I think it does help, knowing that Democrats control the House and the governor's office. It puts us in a position, keep in mind, we're only down by one seat to begin with.
Right.
So it gives us an opportunity to be pragmatic, as Representative Olson said, and really put forward some legislative ideas that make sense for Minnesotans, but aren't necessarily out on the fringes either.
Let's talk about Governor-elect Walz for just a moment. A lot of people don't really know who he is. Have either of you met him? What's he like? What are you expecting from him?
He's a nice guy. I mean, at the end of the day, once you weed through all the political nonsense, he's a really nice guy. He's a longtime Minnesotan. He's been a teacher. He's been in the military. He's been a congressperson. He is just a through and through Minnesotan from Greater Minnesota. I don't think that we could have found a better candidate for right now for trying to unify our state. And his One Minnesota theme, I think, really rings true with a lot of Minnesotans.
You're shaking your head in the affirmative.
Yeah.
I would agree. And I had the experience of working with Peggy Flanagan, so Lieutenant Governor-elect, and she has a phrase that she's been using on the campaign trail, and we've seen it to be true, that she's going to hold the door wide open to bring more people in decision-making power. And we saw that with how they're doing their transition, the kinds of folks that are coming in and meeting with them, the leadership structures they're putting out. We had the opportunity that Governor-elect Tim Walz came to our first DFL caucus meeting of the House just to set a tone about let's start working together from right out of the gate. So I look forward to working with this administration.
The governor-elect wants to raise the gasoline tax. Your feelings on that?
I support that.
Erik?
I think it's been something that we've needed to do for a long time, that we've not had the political courage to do it.
How high should it go?
Well, it's going to depend on exactly what the forecast is, but I would say at least 10 cents is a fair number. And that will give us an opportunity to really invest some money into roads and bridges all across our state, and transit too.
What are some of your other priorities as you head into the next session? And we'll start with you, Representative Olson. I know there were some things you were hoping to work on, the opioid crisis for one last session. Is that still going to be a priority for you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of two buckets as I see it. There's the things we need to do that we didn't get done last session, and then there's what we heard on the campaign trail and sort of the mandate that we come in with that we need to do. So in terms of the opioid epidemic and what we were proposing as solutions last year, we definitely need to bring that to the table. The Senate was able to pass a stewardship fee asking the pharmaceutical companies to pay a penny a pill into the crisis. And that's something that I know our governor-elect would support. The Senate has already been there. It's really now with the House and DFL control, we should be able to get that passed right away. The other issue I'd say that we need to take care of from last year was elder care. There was a lot of movement and work on that, but didn't cross the finish line. And then more locally for Duluth, we need to make sure we pass that sales tax, that's really important. So I think those are kind of the three things that I would see, and a couple others to play cleanup on, and tax conformity, something we need to do. But for this session, we heard a lot around healthcare. That was something loud and clear, I would say, is one of the things, as well as some others as well.
With another increase in the sales tax, what would that bring it to? Are we one of the highest in the state?
Yeah, I mean, we have needs. I mean, we have the potholes, and we already put that to the voters, that they are the ones that, as a legislature, we just need to approve that. It doesn't cost the state anything. It's something that the voters have at 70+% approve that. So it's something that we need to deliver on to make sure Duluth can invest in its infrastructure, invest in its needs, its first responders, everything that the budget pays for.
The governor-elect met with former Governor Jesse Ventura this week, and they're both touting the possibility of, well, they're both supporting the use of recreational marijuana. Your feelings on that?
You know, it's something that I probably can get behind, but there's one really looming question for me, and that's how do we deal with, what the limits are going to be? How do we deal with driving under the influence of marijuana? How are we going to measure that, and how are we going to regulate that? That's a question that I've never really been able to wrap my head around, and I think these are some of the things that we've got to work out before we do it. But I mean, I think the trend is going in that direction, so
the public is ready for it
to figure it out.
Same thing?
And you?
Yeah, I would say that, and I think there's the element too that we've heard Governor-elect Tim Walz talk about too, with the decriminalization and looking at how this has had an impact on our criminal justice system. I think we do have to have that hand in hand as we talk about, what we're going to do around that reform. It also ties to criminal justice and who's been locked up for what in the past.
This would be another tax source as well, is that right?
It would be a funding source, and there's certainly one area that needs funding. Well, we have many areas that need funding, but the Department of Human Services is always in need of funding and is only going to get more as we go forward and our population ages.
Do we need some kind of overhaul in healthcare, and is that in the works at all?
Yeah, I would say one thing we heard loud and clear when we were out campaigning was about the Minnesota Care buy-in. We've been a leader. Minnesota historically has been a leader on healthcare. We're slipping. And there are things we can do. We can build off successes like our Minnesota Care program and support a Minnesota Care buy-in. I would imagine that will come forward in some way, shape, or form this session. Last session, we gave a $432 million essentially blank check to the insurance companies to help bring down costs. That was a temporary fix with a huge price tag. So we really need to dig in, and I think there's some good places to start from already.
What does Duluth absolutely need from the legislative session come the first of the year?
Well, there's two things. I think that they need the funding that they want, and that's the sales tax to start funding transportation. And the second thing that they need is a good economic development package. That's local government aid, that's investments in our infrastructure, that's passing this medical district bill for the East Hillside. I think that's going to be very important. There's a long list of things that we should do, and we've got some bonding projects that we still need to finish up from last year.
Do you see Essentia Health getting some money this time around from the state?
I feel like that's the type of project that takes a year or two to get through, and we pushed it hard last year, but this year we're going to refine it and we're going to come back and we're going to give it another shot.
Mm-hmm. What about the fact that we saw a Republican elected in the 8th Congressional District? Does that tell you anything about where your constituents stand?
I mean, we just spent in the House, I just also was part of a campaign, and so I was able to talk to voters in my district, and campaigns aren't just about a chance to win an election and go serve. They're actually a chance to get out and talk to your constituents, see where they stand, and I try to have my door open and be able to talk. So I see the folks that have been elected, in particular, in Duluth, we've had a chance to have those conversations, and I think what we've heard and what we represent is what people are getting, and we've had that opportunity, and that's why we have elections. And I think the DFL majority comes with a set of mandates around what is asked of us and what we hope to deliver on.
Redistricting could come in a couple of years. What are you hearing about that, and how do you think that'll affect northeastern Minnesota?
Well, redistricting will come. I mean, there's no getting around that. 2022 will be interesting. We'll see what happens. But I do think that if Minnesota loses a congressional seat, and that remains to be seen, but if we drop down to 7, the 8th Congressional District will disappear, and northeastern and northern Minnesota will look a lot different. And we don't know where that line will be drawn. It might go straight across the top of the state. It might be something similar, but my guess is it's going to be significantly different.
Mm-hmm. A little scary for the DFL?
Well, I don't know if it's scary for the DFL or if it's just different for us as Minnesotans, and where we land, we'll see where it is, but it's going to be different.
Other bills that you have in mind that you're going to support?
Well, I think as we've mentioned around healthcare, we're going to have a chance to do budgeting, and really look at that. I think we can see some investment in education to really think about how we're more structurally giving schools the money that they need. I think that's something. I think you've heard Senator Simonson have a nice list of the things we want to support and get done for Duluth, and I'll be working on those as well as doing some of the other issues around opioid and elder care, and some of the other big ticket items.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the DFL has as much clout as it once did in this region of northeastern Minnesota?
Well, I mean, I think that we're evolving as a state, right? That we change, and that's part of the beauty of it all. I think there is an ethic of care that continues, and we have to figure out what care about our neighbor looks like and how that's reflected in state policy. So I actually don't think that our values as Minnesotans and our belief that we should shovel each other's driveways and help out where we can, I think we just have to rethink about what it means to be Minnesotans as our demographics are changing, and we just have to be a part of that reality. And I believe the DFL party can change, move, and evolve with that too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both for being here. It was a good discussion. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you both very, very much.
Yes,
Thanks much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we have the second in a special series we are calling Video Letters Home from former Minnesota State Senator Roger Reinert. Reinert is in the Navy Reserves and has been deployed to Afghanistan. In this week's letter, Reinert explains what a typical day is like during his deployment. Here is his video letter home direct from Kabul, Afghanistan.
Lieutenant Commander Roger Reinert, sending you another video letter home from Afghanistan. Today I thought I'd give you a little bit of an idea of what daily life is like. So first off, this is where I've been living for the last several months. It's a small space, and I share it with one other person, but I realize that there are also a lot of people in theater who don't have it nearly as nice as this. So over here you can see my bed. I've got a little shelf back there. Over there behind me is a little desk, and then right there is a locker that I can keep uniforms and electronics and things like that in. So typical day here, I'm usually up around 5 a.m., 05, so I can get a workout in. If I am going to be inside the wire or on base, I'm usually into my desk by about 8:30 after breakfast. And our days are usually about 12, 13, maybe 14 hours long. So I'm usually there until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Come back, hit the hay, and do it all over again. If it's a day that we're out on a mission, going to be outside the wire, then that day varies depending on what the nature of the mission is. So probably not surprisingly, over here we're always armed, so even inside the wire on base I'm always carrying a sidearm, and if we're going outside on a mission, then I've got body armor, I've got a helmet, I've got my sidearm, and I usually have my rifle as well. We always like to know about weather at home, right? We're Minnesotans. So when I first got here in July, it was usually over 110 for the high, full sun. Again, we're at about 6,100 feet altitude, surrounded by mountains. And it stayed like that for several months, and no precipitation. I think it rained maybe 3 times. And then just within the last couple of weeks here in November, it started to cool off. So the highs now are usually in the 60s, again, still sunny. But at night it's getting down around freezing. So enough that when I get up in the morning, a jacket, gloves, a cap, but nothing like the winter I'm seeing on Facebook and when I talk to my wife. So hope everyone is well at home, and I look forward to giving you another update after the holiday break and the pledge drive. Thanks.
Well, this week a special event was held right here in our studio. WDSE commissioned Ojibwe artist Carl Gawboy to create a painting that reflects the Native American tradition of storytelling. Gawboy's 5 by 7 foot painting portrays the star maiden and the water lily. Here's more about that painting and this week's event.
The idea came up, we would follow an artist from the community here, and the first person that came to my mind was Carl.
It's been called a star maiden. She came down to Earth from outer space, looking for the place on Earth where she can live. And she found the Ojibwe people. And so she brought the water lily down because it looked like stars from her homeworld. And that's how the water lily appeared in our lakes and waters. There are many Ojibwe artists who paint myths. I'm doing mythological work these last couple of years. I want to go back to my old style, which was the scenes of the everyday, but I keep getting drawn into doing mythological work. I must be doing something right. There's a lot of people who like it. Myths are generally set in a time before this one where the rules of physics and reality don't apply. Myth, unfortunately, has come in English to mean a kind of a negative thing, a lie. But that's not the way that I'm using the word myth here. I heard many of these stories, and then I imagined them the way that I ended up painting them, quite realistically. We have all kinds of stories. How the chipmunk got his stripes. I didn't want to paint the real minor stories. I wanted the big ones, the real big important stories. I think it's good that these differences appear, just as long as Ojibwe people realize that these differences are something that should be valued. that the differences apply to their own community and to their own region, their own environment. Unfortunately, there are many Ojibwe who believe that the way that they heard it is the only right way, and they get very critical about anyone who tells a story in a slightly different version. The variety should be treasured. It was a pretty hard thing to work on, because just at the sheer size. I've done big murals before, but it's this is the biggest one that I've done in which there's a single subject, and that was harder than I thought. In a lot of the murals that I did, there are dozens and dozens of human figures in it, but here there's just one, so when you're looking at this painting, you're looking at her and only her. It was hard for me to resist putting all kinds of other figures in here and putting birds and animals and things like that. And I just knew I had to resist that movement because it would have been just too full of characters otherwise. Then you got to sit back and look at it for a long time. But it's the only way to try to imagine how it's going to be in its final place, is to stand back away from it. The perspective was pretty hard. That is, looking out over the water surface, having the water lilies get bigger and bigger as it comes toward the viewer, establishing exactly where she's floating above the water, and I did that by the reflection, showing that she's at least 6 inches above the water surface. And then, as I was doing her, I ran into some problems with the length of her arms, and I was hoping that I didn't make them too long, because I would have to redo the sky behind the arms. And as it turned out, once I got the distance established between her sash and the hem of her garment and her feet, the arms turned out to be the right length. I dread when it's actually going to be hanging, because that's the final decision. It was a hard project.
No drum roll.
Let's turn now to the business news from the editors at Business North. Moline Machinery has broken ground on a 25,000 square foot addition to its West Duluth facility. When complete in 2019, the $9 million space will enhance Moline's industrial bakery machinery product line. The project involves many upgrades to an existing building originally built in the 1930s. Some space will be converted to office areas for engineers and programmers. Craig Ojard and Associates of Duluth is the lead engineering firm, and Johnson Wilson Constructors of Duluth is the general contractor.
Habitat for Humanity's local board has decided to close the Superior Restore by the end of this year. It opened in 2013 to generate profits to produce additional money for home construction, but generated an insufficient return on investment. Board members decided to refocus their energy and resources on the core mission of building homes. The Restore will no longer schedule pickups or accept drop-off donations. It'll be open until inventory is depleted or the end of the year, whichever comes first. Habitat has 2 homes scheduled for local construction next year and 3 during 2020.
The Zoop's grocery store in Cook was destroyed by fire Monday evening and declared a total loss, leaving residents without a nearby supermarket. Although a cause wasn't immediately known, owner Matt Zupancic said he plans to rebuild. Construction will take several months, with next summer expected to be the soonest reopening date. Local residents said the loss will cause considerable inconvenience, with the nearest comparable store located a half-hour away in Virginia. The Zupancich family owns 5 other grocery stores in the region. Well, for more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
And so if you have a comment on our show, call now, dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message, or send an email to almanacnorth@wdsc.org and visit the WDSE website for the latest program updates, broadcast schedules, and news and events here at the station. And Pam, of course, this is our last show for 2 weeks.
Right.
We're going to be off for the week of Thanksgiving, then the following week for the WDSE membership drive.
That's right. I'll be here for the membership drive, but in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
And the same with you and all
right.
your family. Thank you so
Okay,
very much.
thanks.
Join us for our next program on Friday, December 7th. And so for Pam and the crew, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.